Welcome in on this Friday night, November 3rd, high atop of beautiful Houston, Texas. We're heading into week 10 of college football. 5 ranked matchups tomorrow, including 3 of which we will break down on tonight's show. We have K-State against Texas at 11 a.m., followed up by Bedlam around 2:30, followed up by LSU Bama at 6:45 p.m. Central kickoff on CBS. Maybe one of the games of the year in college football, at least in terms of the regular season. We're going to be continuing our college basketball preview, talking about some of the most intriguing players in the country from our perspectives, and what are the best conferences in college basketball. Has that really changed at all, or is it still kind of status quo going into this year, as there is a lot of turnover year to year in college sports, as you guys well know? Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and tell your friends about Dit Hole. If you like college sports, you don't even have to be a Longhorn fan to like this show. There are other aspects of this show, including that man right there, Nixon, who joins me most of the time, at least once a week, on Dit Hole. So welcome, Emmy. How are you doing on this Friday night?
I'm doing good, man. It's the first night of the NBA in-season tournament, kind of a start of a new era in NBA regular season play. So we'll see how that goes. And I mean, I was pretty hyped up for that. I was watching that before we got on live here. And then in terms of what we're talking about today, I mean, Texas has a battle tomorrow. We knew that weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Like even coming into the season, we had this circled on the schedule as a game at home that would be a test. And Kansas State, they're legit.
So that's where we're going to start. You basically took us right into where we were going to start. So thank you for that great lead-in. We're going to go in chronological order of how these games are going to happen. So we've got 3 games, as I mentioned. K-State, Texas is the big noon kickoff game at 11 a.m. Then you'll go over to ABC to watch Oklahoma at Oklahoma State for the last time, at least for the foreseeable future. And then to cap off the night, you'll get LSU Bama. But mixed in there will also be Missouri, Georgia, which could get interesting if Missouri brings its A game. You also have probably what will be more of a fun game in USC Washington later on at night. So there are some games out there that are under the radar. Kansas and Iowa State are also 2 one-loss teams in terms of conference play in the Big 12 that will play each other tomorrow night. I know that game is probably getting overshadowed because of K-State, Texas, and Oklahoma State. But those are other Big 12 championship contenders or teams in the Big 12 championship picture that will play each other tomorrow night. So it's a big day in the Big 12. And it all starts with this game right here. The line has been moving back and forth basically since Monday. It's all the way down to 3.5 now in favor of Texas. So basically what that's telling you is home field generally in college football is 3 points. So basically Vegas is telling you that Texas with Malik Murphy is, I mean, this is basically a pick 'em at this point. On a neutral field in terms of odds making. So I'll say this. Texas, here's what we know. Texas has more talent. They have more talent than K-State. Chris Kleiman, while at K-State, has never beaten Texas. He's 0-4 in his career against Texas. That includes going back to the days of Tom Herman. K-State has beaten everyone else in the Big 12 in that time span. For whatever reason, they've had troubles facing Texas. Texas went into Manhattan last year and beat them on the road, put up 35 points. Of course, that being with, Quinn Ewers, Bijan Robinson had a huge game. Roshan Johnson had a huge game. But what we also know is that K-State has won their last two games, albeit against not so great opponents, Houston and I think whoever they played last week.
I think it was Cincinnati. I think
it was TCU actually. They've beaten them 82-3 combined. So they've been beating down on inferior competition. Texas not necessarily so much, but at the same time, K-State, the two relatively good teams that they have played, they've lost those games. They lost a nail-biter to Missouri, and then they lost to Oklahoma State a couple weeks back before they got this thing rolling. One last thing is, and then I'll pass a question off to you. Let's start from a K-State offensive, Texas defensive perspective, because the last couple weeks, K-State has been deploying a two-quarterback approach with Will Howard starting out games, and they bring in their freshman Avery Johnson, who's more of a dual-threat guy and hard to defend in the run game in certain situations. So from a Texas perspective, that kind of – Rod Babers was talking about this earlier. You kind of have to have two game plans in a way. So if you're the Texas defense – where do you really start in preparing for this K-State offense?
I think, to me, it starts with defending the edges. We know the strength of this defense is up the middle, with Sweat and those guys on our interior defensive line. That's the strength of the defense. Nobody really runs on Texas. And even when they do, it's more, finicky, like kind of gamey stuff, which is, yards are yards, but you're not just going to run it up the gut against Texas. And Kansas State doesn't really want to do that. They're kind of two quarterback system. They have this young freshman. I can't remember his name, but he's a more slight player. He doesn't really have a college football body quite yet. Like with being a true freshman, which makes sense. And he wants to get on the edges. He wants to use his speed. So this game to me is going to be really decided on one, those Texas defensive backs coming up and making tackles in space, and the linebackers staying disciplined on their run fits. Kansas State is going to challenge you from sideline to sideline. That's what I think is their greatest strength as an offense, and Texas is going to have to deal with that with some. I think the answer would be to run blitz in certain situations, like apply pressure, cause chaos in the backfield, get them frazzled a little bit, and see how they respond.
K-State is excellent in converting third downs. Texas, on the other hand, has been one of the better defenses in getting off the field on third downs this year. The reason K-State, though, is so good at converting third downs most of the time is because they set themselves up very, very well on first and second down with that running game. They're averaging over 5 yards per carry this year. So they believe with their offensive line, who I think actually is probably a top one or two offensive line that this Texas front will have faced this year. I mean, it's right. I think it's just as good as Bama's offensive line has been this year, especially on the interior. So that matchup on the interior with Sweat and Murphy and Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins going up against that center guard combination of K-State is a matchup I'm watching in this game. Because you can't, if you're Texas, you can't just let them run, gap scheme on you all day in between the tackles, getting 4 or 5 yards per carry, especially on first and second downs. So I do love your point of on early downs, if you're Texas, you got to be able to kind of keep them off that schedule a little bit. Bring some run blitzes, show some different looks, load the box, even if it means you leave a Ryan Watts or a Jahdae Barron or a Gavin Holmes or a Terrence Brooks one-on-one with these K-State receivers. These K-State receivers they're good players, but they're not Alabama's receivers. They're not even Oklahoma's receivers, I don't think. So you kind of want to try to make K-State beat you with their left hand. Like, try to keep them in third to medium, third and long situations by showing those exotic blitzes, winning up front. T'Vondre Sweat has arguably been the best player on this Texas team. He's definitely the highest graded player by Pro Football Focus on this Texas team this year, and he was excellent last week against BYU, just blowing stuff up each and every play almost, and getting pressure in the middle against Keaton Slovis. You want to make Will Howard throw the ball on third downs. If you look at the box score at the end of this game and K-State has more rushing attempts than Texas, K-State wins this football game. If they control time of possession, they squeeze the clock, and they're able to get into those third and medium to short situations where they are comfortable, it could be a long day for Texas.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to that point, there's a couple stats that I think should be focused on if you're a Texas fan going into Saturday. One is first down success rate. Like, is Kansas State getting to 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, 2nd and 3? If they do that, then Texas is going to really be challenged to really get stops and get off the field, because once you get into 2nd and 3, 2nd and 4, you have the entire playbook available to you. And, as much as you want to run blitz and do all that stuff and load the box, if you're in 2nd and 4, you can't really do that, because then you have the play action available to them. They're going to take some shots. If you're in that 2nd and short yardage, you're going to be able to be a little bit more aggressive. And Will Howard has shown throughout his career as a guy who won the Big 12 championship last year, he has the arm to make those plays happen if they're available. So that's going to be a big thing. And then number two, I forget the exact wording of the actual stat, but it's basically yards before contact. I think that's how it's phrased. Yards before contact is basically how Texas is able to hold the line of scrimmage. If they're holding the line of scrimmage, if they're sending run blitzes, if they're causing chaos in the backfield, making them, make jump cuts and change direction and think about things, that's going to be a big part.
Yeah, so let's flip it. Let's flip to Texas offensively and K-State defensively. K-State deploys a defense, and if you're Texas, you're going to see this the next couple of weeks. TCU kind of does the same concept. Even Iowa State the week after will run kind of a similar defense. And we've seen Sark in particular in his time at Texas really struggle for whatever reason against this 3-high safety look that these teams go with this 3-3-5 with 3-high safety look that these teams have played in the past. K-State does that. That's really kind of their base defense. So if you're Texas offensively with Malik Murphy going into his second start ever in a high-stakes game, where if you're Texas, a loss doesn't necessarily put you all the way out, I mean, you're not mathematically eliminated from Big 12 championship game contention because you're not, but it would make it a lot more difficult for you to get there because I believe ESPN, if Texas wins this game, I believe I heard that their Big 12 championship chances are 80%. And if they lose, it goes all the way down to 15%. So you can kind of see the discrepancy there. It's not a lose in your dead scenario. It is in terms of the playoff, but not in terms of the Big 12 championship game. But going back to my original question, you're Sark. You know you struggled against this defense in the past. You're playing with Malik Murphy in his second start. What's your game plan offensively?
Well, for Malik Murphy, I think, and Sark, really, it's just about getting into rhythm early in the game. I think we'll have a feel for how things are going to go after, about a quarter and a half of the game. If the scripted plays come out and get things going and into rhythm, then that's a really good sign. And I think once Malik Murphy has that confidence going, he's shown that he can move the ball on offense. That's, to me, not the concern. The concern for me would be the turnover worthy plays, and some of the, I guess, inexperience type of throws that we saw a little bit against BYU. But in terms of a game plan, it's just about running the football. Give the young quarterback as much support as you possibly can. Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter, a little bit of short passing game. Just get him into a rhythm throwing the football. He has all the talent in the world. He just has to have the mental side line up with things. And once he gets into the rhythm of the game, I think he'll be there to make the plays happen.
Remember when people were absolutely destroying and questioning the legitimacy of this Texas offensive line after that Rice game, where Rice was able to get in the backfield, disrupt Texas rhythm offensively, push them off schedule. It just wasn't a great performance from that Texas O-line, and they were really worried. We were really worried about this Texas O-line going into Tuscaloosa, but then Texas put on their best offensive line performance that we have ever seen in that game in Tuscaloosa, which kind of won them the game in the end. I mean, that last drive where they just ran the ball down Alabama's throat to run 6 or 7 minutes off the clock and seal the victory. That was the best I've seen a Texas offensive line play start to finish of a football game. I mean, they largely kept Quinn Ewers upright in that game as well. He wasn't getting hit a lot. He had time to throw. There's a reason he had time to, make those throws down the field, and Texas was able to hit so many explosive plays. I think you're going to need maybe not that level of a performance against this K-State team because you're not going on the road, and I don't think K-State has the athletes that Alabama does. But what I will say is in the run game, you're going to need that interior of the offensive line that has struggled in short spurts. It's gotten a lot better throughout the season. DJ Campbell has played really, really well as he stepped into a guard role. Jake Majors, we know he had some injury issues middle of the season, but he's actually been playing the last couple of weeks, even after that injury, I think, that occurred in the Oklahoma game looked pretty serious. He was able to get back on the field after the bye week. And then Hayden Connor, who's probably been the weak point of this offensive line. You're going to need to get push. Let's run between the tackles. Get Jonathan Brooks going. Get CJ Baxter some carries. I think if you're Sark, and the good thing is this game, for whatever reason, the last couple years against K-State in Sark's tenure, even in that 5-7 season where Texas struggled, but they did beat K-State, they've run the football a lot. Like last year, they ran the football, I think, close to 40 times in that game. And then the year before that, I don't know the exact number, but they were near 30, 35-ish touches for those backs. For whatever reason, Sark has kind of figured out, well, let's run the football. We're better than them up front. Let's use our athletes. We have good backs. Jonathan Brooks is a guy that, once again, I mean, for I think the third straight year, a Texas running back leads the country in missed tackles forced. Like, that's what you have to do. We're going to need a good offensive line performance, because if K-State is able to get disruption, that could cause some issues if you're not able to run the football as effectively as you want to. And then get Xavier Worthy more involved. Last week, according to Pro Football Focus, was Xavier Worthy's worst game as a wide receiver at Texas, and it's not even close. He had four drops. He was targeted 11 times and only caught 4 of those balls for only 26 yards. So going to need a lot better than that in this game. Now, to his credit, he did have one of the bigger plays of the game with that punt return. So he made a difference on special teams on a day where he wasn't really effective as a wide receiver. But he's got to be better in this game as a wide receiver. Texas needs him. A.D. Mitchell has been good. I want to see what they do in the red zone. That's really what this comes down to for me, for Texas, as it kind of has been their bugaboo offensively, especially inside the 10, inside the 5, in those real short yardage situations. What does Sark go to in those situations? Because Texas has to score touchdowns in the red zone at a higher percentage than they have been for the majority of this season. 2 for 5 in the red zone in this game, like they did last week against BYU, you will lose this football game. And you might lose it by double digits if you do that. So I don't know. I have to see it. I am pretty worried about this game. It's going to be a dogfight. In terms of a prediction, I'm nervous, but in the end, I think Texas will find a way to win. But it's going to be close. I'm going 24-23 Longhorns in a lower scoring game.
Yeah, I think that's about what I see as well. I think it's going to be mid to high 20s. I see kind of in the 28-30 territory to me. And the red zone is going to be huge. Kansas State has been one of the best red zone defenses in the Big 12. And I think Texas has been, was 112th in red zone efficiency in terms of scoring touchdowns.
Yep.
So
haven't been good.
That's got to be there. The other thing that I did want to mention before we moved on is game script. Last week, you were able to get that punt return and get out to a lead early. And I think that really relieved some of that pressure that Malik Murphy may have been feeling, and he was able to play a little bit more free. They got to try to do that again. If I'm Sark, maybe don't defer the kickoff. Maybe you just take the ball and try to go down and score and get the lead early.
Yeah, I agree. I think one thing Texas has done the last couple of weeks, especially even in the Houston game where they kind of let Houston back in the game, and it was a pretty pathetic performance from the second quarter to the mid-fourth quarter where they didn't really score, didn't do a whole lot offensively, and they allowed Houston to kind of carve them up in the secondary and get back in that game where it was tied eventually early in the fourth quarter. Like something that Texas has done really well, actually, is getting out to those early leads. Now, they've done it in different ways. It hasn't always been go down the field, score a touchdown offensively, get a stop, go down the field, score a touchdown offensively, get a stop. They did that kind of in that Houston game, but last week it was special teams that made a play. And then you had the turnover and they got a stop. And then They got a short field and they went down and scored. I think Texas will move the ball inside the 20s. I think both teams will move the ball inside the 20s. Ultimately, I think what it really comes down to is for K-State, who actually have been a good red zone team this year. So I don't really, although Texas is a good red zone defense, for K-State, it's about staying on schedule, getting into the third and manageable situation so you have everything available to you. And keeping this close early. You don't want Texas to jump out to a 14-0 lead because I think that's going to kind of mess up the K-State game plan a little bit in terms of what they want to do. Make K-State beat you with their left hand. They can throw the ball, but it's not their strength. Make them do that. And if they do it, I mean, they probably deserve to win in the end. But I think if you're Texas, and this is my last point, and we can move on, you feel good about your athletes out there against their athletes at wide receiver, if that's what it's going to come down to. Now, the last thing I'll mention is the official for this game. I'm suddenly blanking on his name, but he was the lead official for last year's Oklahoma State game, where Texas was called for 14 penalties and Oklahoma State was called for 0 penalties. So just keep that in mind going into this weekend. I'm not saying it's going to be that way again tomorrow, but it's a side story to this game for sure. He's been known to not be fortuitous, per se, to the Longhorns in his career calling Longhorns games. Let's go to Bedlam real fast. Oklahoma's coming off a loss. They're 6-point favorites on the road still at a hot Oklahoma State team. Last chance Mike Gundy and this Oklahoma State team gets at Oklahoma for probably the foreseeable future. Last Bedlam game probably for the foreseeable future. So what's your feeling on this one?
Well, my feeling is this environment in Stillwater is going to be absolutely ridiculous. I mean, if there were there couldn't be any more things stacking up against Oklahoma at the moment. Just in terms of not only does Oklahoma State, they always kind of feel slighted when it comes to, being kind of the little brother in terms of Oklahoma schools. But not only that, but in their perspective, you're kind of leaving them for dead in the Big 12. You're just completely abandoning them, and now you're coming into Stillwater, coming off a loss, and Oklahoma State is playing their best football with, I don't even know where I would rank Ollie Gordon in the country, but I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, anytime you're mentioned in any type of way with the likes of Barry Sanders, then people should take notice. I mean, it's been ridiculous what he's been doing. I actually didn't even hear about him before this week, but man, I mean, 250 yards in back-to-back games. That's ridiculous. On top of that, Oklahoma hasn't been able to stop the run that well these last couple of games. They've given up, I think it was 34, and I know it's been above 30 points these last few games. Past 3 games have been above 30 points given up for Oklahoma. So I don't feel great if I'm an Oklahoma fan right now, which makes me feel great because I'm a Texas fan.
Yeah, we're at the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to give my thoughts on this game, bounce it back to you, and then we can kind of move on to LSU Bama, which is going to need its fair share of time. Here's my thought. OU's coming off the loss to Kansas, but they're playing back-to-back road games, and they're going to Oklahoma State. And as you mentioned, it's going to be one what do they
insane.
call it? A wasp nest in there. I mean, it's going to be nuts.
Yeah, you could say that.
The thing for me that's concerning with Oklahoma is you have an injury to your best player on defense, Danny Stutzman. Now, according to ESPN, he's going to be a game time decision. If he plays, that will help this Oklahoma defense at least a little bit. At the second level, he's kind of the guy that ties that front to the back end. They didn't have him for a good portion of that Kansas game. He went out with an injury, and you saw that defense struggle a little bit without him. If he doesn't play, it's going to be concerning. Really alarming if he doesn't play from an Oklahoma standpoint. And Tawi Walker, who's been their lead back, and easily the most explosive player in that backfield for Oklahoma, is also questionable in a game time decision for this game. So those are two key players who are dealing with some injuries or at least are banged up that may or may not play tomorrow. If they do, I like Oklahoma. I think they're going to play pissed off. They've had Oklahoma State's number for the most part. I think Dylan Gabriel bounces back. I think they tackle better. I think they're further along in their development defensively, especially on the outside. They got up for their biggest game of the season against Texas. This is a big one. They don't want to lose this because ultimately that would mean Oklahoma State gets the last laugh, and you don't necessarily want that. Although if you're Oklahoma as a program, they probably don't really care all that much. You also don't want to lose this game because it puts you behind the 8 ball, just like Texas's situation in getting to the Big 12 championship game, since you did lose to Kansas. If you didn't lose to Kansas last week, you would have a lot more room for error here, although probably still not as much. Oklahoma State's receiving corps is also banged up a little bit. I think Oklahoma State will move the ball. I think they'll keep this close. I'd love to see Oklahoma lose. But for the sake of this podcast, this is just I don't have a lot of confidence in this prediction at all. If I were a betting man, I'd stay away from this game. I wouldn't touch this game with an 100-foot pole.
Yeah. Heck no.
But I'm going to pick Oklahoma and Texas to win just because there is still a part of me deep down that wants that Texas-Oklahoma rematch in the Big 12 championship.
Yeah,
and that's really the only reason I pick Oklahoma.
Yeah, I hear you there. I think the fact that their season's on the line means a lot.
Yeah.
But, man, for my money, I'd say Mike Gundy is – you could make the argument the best coach in the Big 12. Certainly maybe the most underrated coach in all of college football.
Yeah.
I mean, they lost to – I can't remember what school, but it was one of those group of 5 teams that just went into Oklahoma State and just kicked their butt.
South
and then
Alabama.
they lost – yeah, and
South
then they
Alabama.
lost to Iowa State.
Yep.
And everybody just kind of left them for dead. But here comes Mike Gundy, basically coming back from being talked about as a buyout candidate to now, if they win this game, they have a path to playing in Arlington in a few months. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma in a close one, but man, I don't feel great about it either.
Yeah. And look, I picked Texas to win. I don't necessarily have I have more confidence in Texas because they're playing at home. And they have been able to beat K-State, and I think they just have more talent. It's different when you're going on the road, but either way, I think both games could end up being 50-50 coin flips in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's why it's so intriguing. So let's move on to this game. LSU at Alabama. LSU coming in ranked 14th in the country. The best 2-loss team in the country for my money at this point. There are some other good 2-loss teams. Notre Dame's up there. We could have that discussion another day. And then Alabama, still 7, 8-1 off the Texas loss. Again, what Vegas is telling you here is this is a pretty evenly matched game. It's a pick 'em on a neutral field. Bama's getting the 3.5 because they're at home. So what is your feeling initially on this game? Or let's start here. We know LSU defensively has struggled, especially in the back end. They're very vulnerable in that back end of that secondary, giving up explosive plays. And Bama, for the most part this year offensively, they've been a 3 yards in a cloud of dust and then hit an explosive play offense. That's what they've done. I mean, just from watching their games, seeing what they've evolved a little bit over the past couple weeks, but that's kind of what they've been. So if you're LSU, what is your game plan to disrupt this Bama offense? Because we know LSU is going to score some points, even though Bama's defense is excellent. Like, both of these offenses are probably going to score some points. What is your game plan, though, for LSU defensively, if there is one?
I think it's we've seen this with going against young backs from NFL defensive coordinators, but I think if you're LSU, you consider some cover zero at different points in the game. Like you're gonna blitz the crap out of Jalen Milroe, see how he up with packages. I think game for the LSU defense is all about getting to Jalen Milroe and getting him on the ground for sacks. If you get this Alabama offense off schedule, they're built to overcome that. I really don't. And in this game, if you're LSU, we're gonna make them have to score 40 to beat us. I mean, we're not to LSU's offense yet. I'm not gonna get ahead of myself, but we know how good LSU's offense is. That's a given. And I don't know. I don't love the matchup for Alabama in this game. I really don't. But Alabama wins this game. They're gonna have to control the clock and really just make this a slug out football game, which they're capable of doing. But LSU knows that. LSU knows that's the avenue for Alabama to win. So if I'm on the LSU coaching staff, I'm doing everything in my power to keep that from happening. I'm sending all types of blitzes. I'm pulling out all the stops to get Jalen Milroe uncomfortable and speeding up that clock.
It's interesting. The Tide have averaged 29.6 points per game and 6 yards per play after Jalen Milroe was named the starter officially after that Week 3 game, which was ugly against South Florida. They've averaged 30 points per game. So we look at Alabama's offense and we kind of say, like, what is the identity of this thing? But what I'm trying to say is they've been solid, not great, right?
Yep.
They're solid, not great. And I do agree with your point that if you get them off schedule a little bit, I don't know that I'd say that they can't overcome it, but
Yeah,
they're certainly, that's the ideal situation if you're LSU. And then you wait for maybe 1 or 2 turnovers to go your way. If you can win the turnover battle, I think LSU wins this game. If you get 1 or 2 mistakes by Jalen Milroe, maybe those are forced by the exotic pressures that you bring to kind of get Jalen Milroe off his spot and force him into a couple mistakes like Texas did. Now, Texas wasn't blitzing him. They were just getting home with their front four for the most part. And that's what made that so impressive. Because going into that game, people thought really highly of this Bama offensive line. After after that game, not so much, right? So
Yeah.
because Ethan Burke, whoever it was, Anthony Hill,
Aaron
Tavondre Sweat,
Terrell.
Byron Murphy, yeah, I mean they were getting home with that front four. If you're LSU and you can do that, that's a big deal. I do think they're going to have to bring some more pressure though, because this Alabama offensive line is playing better, and although it's still not a great pass blocking offensive line. So I do agree with your game plan defensively for LSU. Now on the other side, for Bama defensively, this has been a really, really good defense. Ever since the Texas game, they've just been really good. They stopped the run for the most part. They got playmakers in the back end. They're physical. They're downhill. I mean, it's a Nick Saban coach defense. Kevin Steele is back at defensive coordinator for Alabama. And he's kind of been that big game defensive coordinator throughout his career. I'm interested to see what he has dialed up for Jaden Daniels in this really dynamic LSU offense with Malik Neighbors and everyone else that they have. I mean, it's going to be a chess match. For me, it's going to come down to, these kinds of games always come down to the red zone, in my opinion. What happens in the red zone? Both these teams, I think, will move the ball inside the 20s. What's going to happen down there is what I think is going to decide the game. And I trust Jay. It's hard because both guys, you have Jalen and Jaden in the same game. So I trust Jaden Daniels more to not make the mistake in this game. But all that being said, I think Alabama will find a way to win.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Jaden Daniels has to play lights out if LSU is going to win, and that's a lot to ask when you're going into Tuscaloosa on the road. That's not this. That's not the recipe for going into a top 10 opponent and winning on the road. That's not the recipe for that. You want to be able to make it easy on your quarterback when he's on the road in a hostile environment. And to your point, I think that's why Alabama will win this game. And even with everything that I had said before about this not being a great matchup for Alabama, I think Nick Saban will have a plan for this LSU defense. I think if I were scheming up for this LSU defense or LSU offense, I would probably lean towards probably primarily cover 2 in passing situations, just so you can have a hook curl defender on whatever side Malik Neighbors is on, and then you can kind of have a kind of a pseudo bracket in that type of way. But it can't just be cover 2, and Nick Saban knows that. They got to be able to hide things and just disguise it in different ways for them to be successful in this game defensively.
Yeah. 2 things can be true. Number one, this is easily the best offense that Bama has faced so far. At this exact moment, LSU's offense has an argument for the best offense in the country, in my opinion. That's how good it's been.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it is, but I think you put them up there in that conversation. Daniels, on the other hand, and this goes to that point, if he wins this game, number one, he'll be in the thick of the Heisman conversation. I think he might even be the outright leader if he goes into Tuscaloosa and wins, and he has a monster performance. And he's just a monster. He's 4th nationally in passing yards. He's 5th in quarterback rushing yards when you take out the sack yardage. And he's on pace, or he could at least have the possibility to pull off what Kyler Murray did in his Heisman season with 4,000 passing yards and 1,000 rushing yards in the same year. So he's been that good. Like he's on a Kyler Murray level, and we know how great of a player Kyler Murray was in his college days. On the other hand, though, and this is the second thing that can be true, it's worth mentioning that as good as LSU's offense has been, this Bama defense is the best defense that they faced. And
Yeah.
against arguably the next best defense that LSU has played, Florida State, Tigers only managed 24 points in that game, only 7 after halftime. And Bama's defense grades out quite a bit better than Florida State's does. And we all know, I mean, who's the master of halftime adjustments? It's Nick Saban. So two things can be true. We acknowledge both sides of it. Something's got to give tomorrow night. We will see what does.
Yeah, I want to give you a hypothetical
Okay.
scenario here. If LSU wins at Bama tomorrow,
Okay.
do you see a route for them to become the first 2-loss team in the playoff? Because to me, if in theory Michigan is out of the equation, if what we think will happen with that whole investigation thing happens, and they're out of the equation, then if Ohio State somehow fumbles and maybe one other team that we weren't expecting to loses, then there's a case if LSU can somehow win out still, which it seems a bit outlandish, but I mean, what do you think?
I don't think it's outlandish at all. Now, if you're LSU, you have no margin for error, so you have to go and beat Bama. If you do that, though, I think you win out the rest of the regular season. Like, even if they lose this game, I think they're winning out. I think they're beating Florida. They're beating the crap out of Georgia State, and they're going to beat A&M at home at the end of this year, especially because they're pissed off about what happened at the end of last year. It was a sour ending to last year for LSU. They got beat by A&M in that game, and it wasn't close. But then you're going to have to go to Atlanta and likely play, at this point, Georgia. So you're going to have to play Bama and Georgia here in the next 5 or 6 weeks. You're going to have to beat them both to go to the playoff. But with your offense, your quarterback, you can pull it off. And if you do that, I think you're getting in. No other team would be able to say that despite having 2 losses, they'd beaten Alabama on the road and then Georgia on a neutral field.
In Atlanta, which is basically on the road.
Yeah, potentially, in a spot where Georgia hasn't lost a game in pretty much 3 years at that point, right? So, yeah, I think there's a path now. If you're LSU, and this could just be me, you're still hoping for chaos elsewhere. But the one thing you do want, I think, if you're LSU, is Florida State to stay undefeated, because you still want that loss to look like what it was. I mean, I think I'm higher on Florida State than other people. I think they're going to win out and stay undefeated. But you're hoping for chaos, but you're still hoping that Florida State is a team that doesn't totally fall off, which I'm not really expecting at the end of the year.
Okay, yeah. Now we can move on to our college basketball conversation. I wanted to throw that out there because I thought that would be a fun little direction to go in. But now we're going to get into our 5 most intriguing players going into the college basketball season. And the caveat here is there's no real criteria here. We're just kind of going off of what our general feeling is for said player. So I'll let you start us off. Who did you have? I mean, no particular order, but who did you have as your first player?
Man, there's so many players in college basketball that I could talk about all day long. I've been reading about them, and this is what I do. I love this kind of stuff because it's. I mean, some of these guys will be in the NBA next year. Others will be major storylines in March. And as a watcher of college basketball, I watch more games than most. For me, the most one of the more intriguing players this year is Tyrese Proctor at Duke. Um, the reason he's intriguing is because he ended last year on an absolute tear as a freshman, along with Kyle Filipkowski, uh, shining as the Blue Devils' primary ball handler through the second half of the season, which allowed Jeremy Roach to really do what he's done best in his career, which is create off the ball. And it was kind of a two-man backcourt. And they're going to have that once again this year with another year of experience. As we know, he's from Australia. Tyrese Proctor. He's going to his sophomore year. Over that time span, he averaged 11 points and 4.4 assists over their final 10 games. And he's a superior athlete to most of the guards that he's going to face. He's pretty lengthy. You'd like to see his shooting improve, but I think he could lead the league, meaning the ACC in assists in year two. I expect him to take a big jump in terms of his playmaking ability. And I think he's going to take a jump in terms of his overall offensive game going into year two with another year of experience and I think a better roster than they had last year around him. So I'm looking at Tyrese Proctor as a guy that if he does what I think he can do this year, he could be a top 10 pick next year in the draft.
Yeah, I had Tyrese Proctor on my list also, and I think just in the most simple terms possible, I think if you're answering the question why is he intriguing, it's just he could be the primary ball handler and possibly most important player on a top 3 team in the country. And we talked about some of our teams in our championship bubble, in our championship favorites, if you will, in our last episode. But Duke is right there in the mix. And that backcourt that you mentioned, the synergy that they have, I think Proctor's ability to take care of the basketball as well, his assist to turnover ratio coming into his sophomore year, I think will improve even more. I think there's a real chance that he's maybe ACC first team. I think that's probably a lock, if
Yep.
I'm being entirely honest.
No, it's certainly in the question. He could even be, it's probably more unlikely, but he could even be an All-American, first,
Yeah.
second, or third team. I mean, he's got that kind of potential. I have more players I want to talk about, but do you have a certain player you want to bring up?
I had a player in mind. I'm keeping it kind of local here. I'm going with Dylan Dessou.
Okay.
And I'm sure you'll enjoy this conversation. Obviously, 6'9" for Texas. We all know him. We all love him. But a couple things. We're all kind of expecting, obviously with a few guys leaving, he's going to be more involved in this scoring side of things. And where's the jumper going to be at? That's the part of this that's going to decide things for Texas. The spacing. Can he be on the floor next to our rim protecting transfer that we brought in? I can't remember his name at the moment.
Yeah.
But can he share the floor in multiple different front court combinations? Can he be that versatile guy? And not only that, if he does improve his jump shot, he could be a lottery pick. I mean, the defense, the motor, the feel for the game, it's all there already. I mean, he screens at an extremely high level. He embraces that part of the game, the dirty work part of the game. And NBA scouts are going to love that. The last missing piece is the jump shot. And not only is that going to help Texas, but that's going to help his career as a whole. And as a Texas fan, that's going to be a big storyline to watch for. in the early part of the season and as the season goes along.
Dylan Dessou is a fascinating conversation, and he's an intriguing player. I mean, the way he finished last year, I think it brings even more attention to Dylan Dessou than there was ever before early last year or the year before when they brought him in. I feel a sneeze coming on. Oh, no. If I sneeze, just warning you. Look, from mid-February on, he averaged 14 points, 6.8 rebounds in his last 11 games. He was excellent in the tournament up until he got hurt in that Xavier game in the Sweet 16 and wasn't able to go against Miami in the Elite Eight, which really hurt Texas, I believe. I believe if they have him on the floor, they probably win that game and go on to the Final Four, although there's no way to absolutely know that. I think the intriguing part for Dylan Dessou is his health, because he's been dealing with this foot injury. He's had some nagging injuries throughout his career, and he's not going to be on the floor for at least the first couple of weeks of the season Texas is going to play the long game with him. They'd hate to put him on the court too early, have him aggravate that injury even more, and then not have him when conference play starts, because that's ultimately where it's really going to matter for Texas. And if you look at Texas's non-conference schedule, realistically, they should be able to win most of these games without Dylan Dessou. I mean, he's not a necessity to most of their non-conference schedule. And they'll have Caden Shedrick on the floor, so it won't necessarily be an end-all, be-all. They'll still have some size out there. But ultimately, and I'm not saying you're wrong about Dylan Dessou, he's intriguing, but I had a different Dylan in mind from a Texas perspective as my intriguing player, and that's Dylan Mitchell. For me, I think he's the X factor to Texas's season. By that, I mean, if he elevates his offensive game and he becomes kind of that monster two-way wing player that's so versatile and lengthy defensively, can run the floor and is super athletic, and has more of a resemblance of a jump shot and can knock jump shots down consistently and can create his own shots outside the paint, that could elevate this Texas team from being just kind of like a top 25 good team to a top 10 great national championship contending team. I think he's the key. And so far, it's looking pretty good. In Monday's exhibition game against St. Edwards, he showed flashes once again with that jump shot. He's, I think, more bought into this Texas system this year. He's had a full off season to put on some weight, to get stronger, develop his game offensively. He did test the NBA draft waters after this past season, decided to ultimately come back to Texas for another year of development, which I think he could use certainly. But at the NBA Combine, he did flash his his improved 3-point jump shot. I think he's been in the lab. And if he becomes that kind of guy for Texas, that really takes the ceiling of this Texas basketball team to another level, to the point where I think they could find themselves in a similar spot in March as they did last year if Dylan Mitchell becomes that dude.
Yeah, definitely, man. That was a guy I considered as well, but I think just because I've been watching Dylan Dessou longer, I guess
No,
that's kind of where
both
but yeah,
are intriguing. Another player on Texas that we won't get into a conversation about is Max Abmas. I mean, he's fascinating as a player.
Yeah.
Another guy I really wanted to talk about for the sake of this conversation, and I don't know how much you kind of know about him, but Caleb Love from
Yeah.
North Carolina. Just a little bit of a background for you guys. We'll try to get out of here around 9:05 here in the next 10, 15 minutes. Caleb Love, it it didn't fully work out at North Carolina. He had his moments. We know he can get his own shot. He's a shot creator, but he's not always efficient. He doesn't always make smart plays offensively, and he's a liability on the defensive end. That's been the knock on him throughout his career. If the shots are going in, it looks great, but when they're not falling, it hasn't looked great. And at points of last season, he was sort of the bugaboo on that North Carolina team. Now, there were other bugaboos, which is why they started preseason number 1 and missed the tournament. I mean, he wasn't the only reason why that happened. But ultimately, coming in as a 5-star recruit, had a really good first year, wasn't so great last year. It was an up and down season. He tries to transfer into Michigan this offseason. Didn't really have enough requisite credits academically to get to fully transfer into Michigan. So he decides to go to Arizona, which is ultimately where he ends up this year under Tommy Lloyd. I think the reason this is intriguing is because I think this fits. I think the general idea from both a program perspective and a player perspective from what Arizona wants to do philosophically from an offensive standpoint, I think it fits Caleb Love with the pace that they play with at Arizona, the bigs that they have. And I think under a more stringent system under Tommy Lloyd, I think Tommy Lloyd will ultimately be able to help Caleb Love with his shot selection and shot quality, which is something he's struggled with. And I think that he could be in for a pretty good bounce back season. I look at him as one of the big bounce back candidates in college basketball this year, and he's going to make Arizona fun to watch. That's for sure. And Arizona's looking for. We know they've been good in the regular season, but a couple real early exits the past couple of NCAA tournaments where shot making in March has become an issue for them. And Caleb Love could provide them some of that. It's just whether or not it'll be efficient and whether or not those shots will fall.
Yeah, he's a microwave scorer. When I was doing prep for this, I was reading some of the Athletics articles, and the Athletic has him as the number one most intriguing guy
Yep.
going into the season. And I mean, I can't say they're wrong. I mean, whenever you're a 5-star recruit going to North Carolina and you show the flashes that he did in his first year and then fail to improve on that, I think it's more so a curiosity than anything of what this is going to look like. Just new situation, entirely new lease on life. I guess that's a bit dramatic, but you get the point. Um, I think it could be good for both sides. I think Arizona is kind of looking for redemption as a program
Yep.
after some of the scandals that they've been a part of, and Caleb Love is looking for redemption also. So I think it's a good fit.
Yeah. Remember, we all remember uh, Farley Dickinson being the second 16 seed to knock off a 1 seed and beating Purdue last year and the run that they made. But don't forget about Princeton and what they did as a 15 seed last year, knocking
Yeah.
off Arizona in that first round of the tournament. And I think Caleb Love could be a big part of ultimately what they want to do at Arizona. They did lose Kirk Kriisa to the transfer portal. He went to West Virginia. So they needed help in the backcourt, and they get one of the better players in the transfer portal in Caleb Love. It's just let's see what Tommy Lloyd and this Arizona team can mold him into offensively. Can they make it different than it was at North Carolina? Do you have anyone else? Oh, I have a player.
I had one more
Okay,
guy
go
on
ahead.
my list.
You have one more guy, and then I have one more guy.
All right, perfect. My last guy was KJ Adams from Kansas. Um, to me, I think it's just about his style of play that's most intriguing. I mean, it's a 6'7" wing point forward type. He pushes the pace. He's, I mean, pairing him with Hunter Dickinson just feels weird because of how fast they want to play. But man, there's not much you can say. There's not any form of athleticism or athletic play that he leaves on the table to be desired. Like he can make any play in the book. Like the thing about him though also is not only are they playing fast and getting out on the break, but also he's getting his teammates involved as well. I think he's intriguing in a lot of different ways. But who did you have as your last guy?
Well, a little bit on KJ Adams first. He's 6'7", and he was the Big 12's most improved player last year as a sophomore. He doubled his per 40 minutes scoring output per The Athletic, finishing with double-digit points in 20 of his last 29 games. He was a big part of that Kansas team last year, even though he wasn't necessarily a go-to scoring option. Like Kansas didn't draw up. He wasn't the focus of their offense, although he's a good roll man. He sets good screens. He's a good cutter. He's good in transition. If he can take a little bit of a step in his on-ball offense, creating shots for himself, being that real guy that can kind of play off Hunter Dickinson in a way, I think he's a very intriguing player. He's number 13 on the Athletics list of their top 25 most intriguing players. And you could move him up and down, but he's right up there he's probably the most intriguing player on that Kansas team. I mean, we all know about DeJuan Harris. We all know about Hunter Dickinson, but KJ Adams I'd put Kevin McCullough in sort of the same conversation, but KJ Adams is one of those guys. My last player was Justin Moore at Villanova. He's number 4 in the Athletics list of the most intriguing players. I'd probably put him 2 or 3. There were a lot of reasons that last year didn't go the way you wanted it to go, especially if you're a Villanova fan in the first year post Jay Wright. They ended even 500 record, 6th place in the Big East, which is a tough conference, but that's not the Villanova standard. That's not what Villanova fans don't settle for that. But if you had to give an explanation of why things didn't maybe go as well as they could have, well, you would go with Justin and Moore as your 2 words to describe why it didn't go well. They didn't have that connective fiber that Justin Moore provides them on the floor after January 29th, when he unfortunately suffered a torn Achilles. So he's coming off a big injury. But he's a fascinating player. 6'4" guard, so he has good size. And the Wildcats ultimately were 7-6 in games that he did play. And he averaged 13 points, 3.5 assists, and had an effective field goal percentage of 52%. So he was really efficient, and he was scoring at a pretty high rate on a Villanova team that, let's just be honest, wasn't very good. And I think with some of the transfers that they brought in, they're going to be a lot better this year. And I think they could even be a sleeper team in the Big East. I think outside of the top 3 that we at least have in our minds right now, which would be Marquette, Creighton, and UConn, Villanova's right there, I believe. And if they get a healthy version of Justin Moore, I think with this reloaded roster and him potentially being that lead guy, that lead go-to scorer, size, pretty good defensively. We'll see how the Achilles injury coming back from that maybe hinders him a little bit on that end of the floor with some of the lateral movement and stuff like that. But I think losing him was a big reason why Villanova really scuffled down the stretch last year. And in Villanova's most successful years, what have they had? They've had that lead guard, the Ryan Archidiakono, the Jalen Brunson, whoever it may be, Josh Hart. I mean, whoever that guy is, they've had that guy. And I think Justin Moore could be that guy for them.
Yeah, I mean, whenever you're coming off an Achilles injury, especially in basketball, to me the biggest question is how are you defensively? And as to your point, he was fine last year defensively. That wasn't really a concern. And number two is how is your finishing at the rim? Like, did the injury affect your ability to elevate in the lane and finish through contact? And to his credit, I mean, he was just as efficient as he ever has been. I mean, he didn't really see a drop off at all. So now with a full off season to get even more healthy and recover even more, no pun intended. I mean, the sky's the limit for this guy. I think he could average 22 points easily. I think I see a world where, I mean, he feels he can fill it up, man.
Yeah. I there are a lot of other players that we could talk about, but we would be here all night long. So it is Friday night. We both want to go watch this in-season tournament that's going on. Emmy's Mavs will take on the Nuggets here shortly.
Yeah.
There's some college football going on tonight, but it's not even college football that I'm tuning into. So that tells you everything you need to know about the quality of games that I think are going on right now. Just wait till tomorrow. That's all you need to watch. Exciting day of college football. I think all three of the games that we broke down are, I hate to say it, but could be, let's put it this way, they could be, all of them could be 50-50 games in the fourth quarter, for
I
sure.
think you could argue any of them could end up being the game of the year.
Yeah.
In their respective conference, maybe. Maybe not Oklahoma State. Maybe not. But I think all three are going to be close games regardless.
All three are going to be really good games. I think Texas is in for a dogfight, hopefully a dogfight that they win. I think Oklahoma's in for a dogfight, hopefully for their fans, sake, they win. Same thing with Alabama. They're trying to keep their playoff hopes alive. LSU is trying to keep their season alive. So, and the winner of that game has the inside track to the
SEC West
championship, as Alabama has already beaten Ole Miss, and LSU, of course, if they beat Bama, would have the head-to-head. So, exciting day of college football. I can't get enough of this college basketball stuff. I think this was a really good conversation. If you didn't get to see it, go check out the conversation we had on Monday with our championship bubble. We didn't get to all the teams, but we got to a decent amount of them, and the ones that are going to be atop the rankings, at least to start the year, and rightfully so. It's a possibility that I might do another dit hole on Sunday to recap K-State, Texas, hopefully in a good way, and do some more college basketball stuff. I'm not going to make Emmy come on for that unless he wants to, because what we are going to be doing is we are going to be doing a live stream later on in the evening for that Bills-Bengals game, or at least that's what we've said we're going to do. So keep an eye out for all that. Hopefully you guys like and subscribe to our channel. Check out all the other content we do. And tell your friends about Dit Hole, especially if they like college sports. What were you going to say, Emmy?
I did have a I guess, comment question of the day, but
Oh yeah,
I think
I forgot.
I think I'm gonna save it for Sunday because it is a bit of a loaded question, and we are like reaching 100 hour and 20 minutes here. So you're just gonna have to wait and see. It's a good one. It's a good one.
Okay, I can't wait to hear it. So I mean, if you're curious as to what that is, and you don't even want to watch our live stream, but you just want to hear his question, well, that gives you a reason to tune in for at least a little bit of it. So we appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys on Sunday. I'll probably see you twice, but Emmy and I will definitely see you for uh, the live stream on Sunday night. It's our first football live stream of.
Ever.
I guess it's technically our second because we did live stream some of that
Oh, the Monday
Vikings
Night Football. Yeah. Yeah.
Niners game, but start to finish, we haven't really done one of those. It should be exciting. So hopefully the Horns win. Have a great college football Saturday and an even better NFL Sunday.
Yep.
And just like the chances of the Suns and Kevin Durant stopping Victor Wembanyama last night, and just like the chances of tomorrow's game against K-State not being a dogfight in the fourth quarter, we are going. Hook 'em horns, y'all.
And just like the chances of Shaq not being a hater, we're also going.